Welcome into the Commanders Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. I'm coming to you from my apartment here in Dallas, Texas tonight to kind of go over the latest moves that the Washington Commanders have been making. They've made even more re-signings, and they've even added another outside player this evening here in a rotational edge rusher spot. I'm going to reveal who that is here in just one moment, but first, make sure you guys click that subscribe button because we're getting you guys the latest breaking news updates on the Washington Commanders all throughout NFL free agency. We have already put out a bunch of breaking news videos surrounding the Washington Commanders, and if they continue to make big moves, we will have you guys covered right here on the Washington Commanders Report presented by Chat Sports. So let's dive into the new player that the Washington Commanders have brought in from outside of the organization, and that is rotational edge rusher Jacob Martin. Now, Martin is somebody that's coming to us from the Chicago Bears last year. He was a rotational piece. He's known more of as a speed rusher. He's under 250 pounds, so he's more of almost like a third down, kind of lighter speed rusher in pass rush situations type of guy that comes in and specializes in getting after the quarterback by using his explosiveness and his speed around the edge. He had 3 sacks last year. In 7 years in the National Football League, he has 21 total sacks. So Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. certainly see him as a high-effort player, somebody that's going to be able to come in here, potentially fill a rotational role and pass rush situations here on the Commanders' defensive line. Now, Jacob Martin is somebody that's going to be able to come in, do those things. Of course, you got Dorrance Armstrong right now. You brought in Dietrich Wise, who can play on the interior as like a 5 technique, but he can also play on the edge if absolutely needed. It'll be interesting to see how they use Dietrich Wise after signing him in free agency last night. Of course, they brought in guys like Javon Kinlaw and Eddie Goldman as well to play on the interior of the defensive line. Not to mention they brought back Sheldon Day earlier today in a re-signing, but in some other re-signings, Noah Igbenogany, the slot cornerback, is brought back, and I think he's going to be brought back in more of a backup role. Last year, he was a full-time starter as the team's slot cornerback. But with the signing of Jonathan Jones, it'll be interesting to see where they put Jones. He can play in the slot. He's played some very good ball in the slot, but recently he's played more on the outside, and that's kind of been where he's made his bread and butter in the National Football League. So it'll be interesting to see what their plan is for Jones, whether they put him on the outside, whether they put him in the slot. And the same question goes for Mike Sainristil, who they played on the outside last year, but they drafted to be more of a nickel slot type of player. So Noah Igbenogany is somebody that knows this defense, obviously. He's a high-effort player. He's a good locker room guy to have in your locker room. And if somebody goes down with an injury, God forbid, Igbenogany has experience with this group, chemistry with this group. I like the re-signing of Noah Igbenogany as a backup slot cornerback. They also brought back Trent Scott, who's a versatile kind of backup offensive tackle, swing tackle / played a little bit of guard towards the end of the season when Sam Cosmi got hurt last year. So I kind of like the re-signing of Trent Scott as well, somebody that has experience playing along multiple positions along this Commanders offensive line. Obviously not bringing him in as a starter, but it is worth mentioning that he has played multiple positions along this offensive line in big moments for this football team. So I guess it's good that he's back. They also restructured Andrew Wiley's contract. I got to be honest, guys, I don't love that deal that they made with Andrew Wiley. I've been advocating for them to just cut bait with him. Honestly, I haven't been the biggest fan of his tape the last couple of seasons here in Washington, but clearly this team wants him around either at that right tackle spot or potentially kicking him into guard. But honestly, right now, after the Laramie Tunsil trade, it kind of seems like this team is planning on having Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, Brandon Coleman at left guard. Of course, you got Tyler Biadasz at center, Sam Cosmi at right guard, and then Andrew Wiley. With that restructure, it does save them some money, but it also allows them to keep him in Washington for the foreseeable future, and probably as the starting right tackle of this football team, especially if they don't find a suitable replacement at tackle in the NFL draft. I don't think it's out of the question that they get a guy in the NFL draft this year to fill the right tackle spot, especially eventually to take over for Andrew Wiley, but the fact that they're keeping him around here tells me that they probably view him still as this team's starting right tackle, at least heading into 2025. Another signing, a re-signing here that the Commanders announced today, Nick Bellore, the linebacker / special team specialist, along with Jeremy Reeves and Tyler Owens. Bellore was one of Commanders' best special teams players last year, so bringing him back in a rotation, not even a rotational, more of a depth role at linebacker, but also as a special teams piece. You always need special teams players. You always need guys that are high effort like Bellore to come in here, and I think that it's perfectly fine to re-sign him at this juncture. I want to give you guys kind of another recap here of how I'm feeling about the Washington Commanders offseason to this point. I think that they've done some really good things. Obviously I was a big fan of the Deebo Samuel trade, getting that true number 2 wide receiver to pair with Terry McLaurin and, of course, quarterback Jaden Daniels. And I loved the Laramie Tunsil deal. I think you gave up a lot of picks to get him, but it's a premium position. He is an awesome player. He's going to be able to really protect Jaden Daniels. And, of course, if you're making this offensive line better, that is good with me. But other than that, I got to say I've been a little bit underwhelmed with some of the moves that the Washington Commanders have made. Apparently, according to DJ Reed, he was expected to potentially go to the Detroit Lions or the Washington Commanders. The Commanders were in on DJ Reed, but he ended up signing a $20 million contract elsewhere. The Commanders missed out on him, and of course they missed out on guys like Charvarius Ward. They missed out on other guys, Carlton Davis, and they ended up with Jonathan Jones, who has been a good player, but was really, really not good last year. He really fell off a cliff last year. He is getting older, and that's definitely got to concern you if you are a Washington Commanders fan and you're planning on having Jonathan Jones, at least at this juncture, being one of your starting cornerbacks, whether that be your number 2 corner on the outside alongside Marshawn Lattimore or kicking him into slot. And honestly, based on the way he played on the outside last year, I almost think the plan should be having Jonathan Jones be your slot corner and then just keep Mike Sainristil on the outside. That is, of course, if you don't draft somebody that's going to be a starter for you in the NFL draft this year. And after making an investment in Jonathan Jones, it's just a 1-year, $6.5 million contract, but he is a starting player. So I kind of feel like at this point, Jonathan Jones is somebody that this team is at least probably going to go into week 1 as a starting player. And, I was hoping for something more from this group. With as much cap space as they still had, I was kind of hoping that Adam Peters was going to make a bigger splash at corner than they ended up making. Also, some of the moves on the defensive line. I think they gave Javon Kinlaw way too much money. Dietrich Wise, kind of just not kind of an underwhelming player, let's call him. The edge rusher position, now if they trade for Trey Hendrickson and they give him a deal and they trade whatever pick they trade to go get him, then I think, the math changes. But right now you got like Dorrance Armstrong, you've got Dietrich Wise, and then you've got Jacob Martin now after this signing of Jacob Martin. So it's like the edge rusher position once again doesn't seem to be a big priority. Of course, you brought back Bobby Wagner, but he's a liability in coverage at this point in his career. You were not able to bring back Jeremy Chin. I was hoping that they were going to be able to do that. And, I do like some of the other re-signings, the guys that they have brought back. Marcus Mariota, it's nice to have him back. They're bringing back both of the backup running backs and Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Jeremy McNichols, so they're bringing all their running backs back from last year. I got to say, I was a little bit disappointed that Olamide Zaccheaus ended up leaving the building as well. I thought that he was the best wide receiver between him, Noah Brown, KJ Osborne, Jamison Crowder, that crew last year, and now he's going to be going to the Chicago Bears, where I think he's going to be a pretty decent piece for them. I was kind of upset to see Olamide Zaccheaus leave the building. It's nice to see Zach Ertz is going to be back, John Bates is going to be back, but if you're asking me to say, this team that the Commanders are assembling here is way better than the one that they built last year, I just don't know if that's the case. I think that they upgraded at wide receiver 2 in Deebo Samuel, but even he had his struggles last year, and he's going to have a lot to prove in this offense. And Laramie Tunsil's great, but he's getting older, and he does get injured from time to time. And you gave up a lot to get him. And then other than that, I just don't know. Will Harris is a decent player, but I don't think he can replace Jeremy Chin and his athleticism and his size in this defense. I still think that Adam Peters has a lot of work to do. And if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I've been pretty disappointed. I've been pretty underwhelmed with what they have done here in the first week of free agency. And of course, a lot of the big players have been signed. And, I don't know if there's a whole lot of room left, at least to get veteran players, maybe outside of a big trade like Trey Hendrickson. I would love this team to land him, especially after Myles Garrett signed that massive contract in Cleveland. But right now, like the edge rusher position, I would say is worse than what it was last year. The defensive interior line, I think, is worse than it was last year. I would argue that the safety room is worse than it was last year. I would say the cornerback room is better, but I wouldn't say it is a ton better. Jonathan Jones and Marshawn Lattimore both kind of had down years last year, and they're expected to be your starters. They have big question marks heading into this season. So I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, guys, about this offseason, but you went into this offseason with a lot of money to spend. And you had an opportunity to make some big moves. You went out and got Deebo Samuel. I thought that was a really good start. The Laramie Tunsil trade, I don't mind it as long as he stays healthy and he ends up being the player that you paid for. But there's a lot of stuff that's underwhelming to me. And I'm hoping that I'm wrong on a lot of these guys. I'm hoping that a lot of these guys that have had down years end up turning it around here in Washington. We've certainly seen some people last year with this team turn it around after some kind of disappointing seasons in years past. So there's definitely not a reason to panic. This team went to the NFC Championship game last year, and they have a very bright future with Jaden Daniels leading the way. But with all the cap space that they did have at their disposal this offseason, I will say I expected a little bit more from this group and from Adam Peters and Dan Quinn at this point in time. Obviously, if they get Trey Hendrickson, that is a move that defines your offseason, and that can still happen with him still on the trade market, all that different stuff. They could still make moves. They could still have a stellar NFL draft. We'll be covering the draft a ton on this channel moving forward. But I'd be lying to you guys if I said that I was thrilled or if I was really, really pleased with this collection of wide receiver or collection of free agents that Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have brought in. So I'm hoping that these guys prove to be really good commanders. I really hope that Johnny Newton, Marshawn Lattimore, Jonathan Jones, a lot of these guys that they're expecting to step up, do step up in the ways that they are expecting. Because if they don't, it's going to be tough to get back to even where they were last year at the end of the year in the NFC Championship game. So I'm hoping that this team can really rally around each other, and I hope that they can continue to make quality signings throughout the offseason. I hope they have a really, really good NFL draft. But outside of a couple really good moves that I really, really like, I think, there's still room to grow, and there's still work to be done here with the Washington Commanders if this team is going to take that next step and become a true title contender and really contend with teams like the Philadelphia Eagles in this division and in the conference next year. The Los Angeles Rams, adding Devontae Adams to a team that almost beat the Eagles in the playoffs last year. I think that there's still room to grow and to get better here if Washington wants to assert themselves as a true favorite in the NFC. So I guess we'll see what kind of moves Adam Peters has in store for us here in the days and weeks to come, of course, leading up to the NFL draft. For more breaking news coverage, when they make more signings, we're going to get them to you guys tomorrow and every day during this NFL offseason. So make sure you click that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, hail to the Commanders.